Hey bitches, welcome back to And World Peace. I took a little over a week break. Part of that was intentional, part of that was unintentional. The intentional part is that I really wanted you to be able to digest episodes 1 through 4. The unintentional part is that, lo and behold, a stomach bug ripped its way through my body last week. So we took a little bit more time off than planned. That's okay. We are back. We are ready. We've got this Minisode releasing. And then we have our second guest joining the show later this week. So be on the lookout for that new episode. It will come out Friday. I'm so excited for you to hear her story. She is an absolute fucking force. I am just so pumped to have her on the show. We actually already have our guests for November and December. They are all locked and loaded. And oh my God, we have some bad bitches in store for you. I'm so excited. I cannot wait for them to share their stories. I honestly can't believe that I even got this group of women to be on the show. I'm so grateful. It's going to be amazing. A couple of general housekeeping notes I want to include about how you can support the show. So first is that And World Peace is now on Patreon. You can find the link to our Patreon in the show notes. And that is basically just a way for you to support the show on a little monthly subscription basis. And in turn, you get access to exclusive content that I will release outside of Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. So it's just a little extra bonus, piece of content that you get in turn for supporting the show, or pieces of content rather. The second piece of support that you can provide is through listener support, and that is through Spotify directly. So if you're listening on Spotify, you can access our listener support. That is a one-time donation to the show. Of course, you don't have to do any of these things. These are totally optional. I will still be making episodes regardless. So the last thing is that, obviously, follow us on Instagram. It's at @AndWorldPeacePod. And that is where I will answer questions via DMs. If you have an episode or a topic for an episode that you really want to hear, please feel free to message me over there with your suggestions or with some questions that you may have. I'm happy to answer them. And obviously, be sure to share this with anybody that you think may like the show. Speaking of messaging me on Instagram and asking questions and all of that good stuff, I actually had an old friend who DM'd me on Instagram, and she posed a really interesting question, and that's what today's minisode is going to be about. So I know I said that this show is obviously not all about pageantry, but there's clearly some big, pretty big, heavy pageant undertones happening here. So I figured that, I'd go ahead and answer this question and just kind of explore it a little bit further. And I want to explore it sort of out loud, Welcome to my personal fucking diary. So anyway, I had this old friend DM me on Instagram, and she posed this really interesting question. And she asked if I would ever let my hypothetical children do pageants. So this is a really interesting topic to me because I got married a year ago. My husband and I are obviously kind of on the track of potentially pursuing children or having children of our own. And so this kind of, notion of what are we going to, quote, let our children, I use the word let very loosely, let them participate in. That comes up a lot, when we're talking about what we want this life with children to look like. This friend also did ask about my parents' perspective on pageantry. And I thought that perhaps a really fun little Christmas episode could be, I could take my little podcasting mic back to Iowa and I would get my parents' perspective and just, ask them some questions about, what it was like having a kid, roll through the pageant circuit. But for now, we're going to explore the first part of this question, which is based solely on my hypothetical children. So, which we're not sure if they are even going to happen anyway. So obviously I don't have any children. So I just want to stress the purest form of hypotheticals. But if you know me, you know that diving into the pop culture zeitgeist of JonBenét Ramsey and Toddlers and Tiaras, it's literally my favorite fucking hobby. A reminder that it was the brother in the case of JonBenét. It should be noted here that I never did pageants like that. And I emphasize that because I entered into pageants as a child that were a bit more what I'll refer to as tame. I didn't do anything outrageous with like my hair or my makeup. I did, however, perform a questionable talent routine in a nurse's outfit to Robert Palmer's Bad Case of Loving You. But then that routine went on to win me a national title. And let's fucking face it, that song is a goddamn bop. So I digress. So I never did the kind of pageants with the weird like tutu looking dresses or the fake teeth or the insanely large hair. Although I did just kind of have like a big ass head and a lot of hair. So I guess you could say it was large. But I did still do them, right? Like I still did a version of pageants that, you know, might have looked a little different from the stereotypical Toddlers and Tiaras pageantry, but it was still pageantry. And each pageant in its own right requires some kind of parading around on stage, some kind of flaunting of self that might even seem inappropriate until you're, 18 and maybe like a consenting adult. It's really all perception and how you view them, right? So if you view pageants as something that is inherently exploitative, then you'll probably feel really inclined to say that they should probably just cease to exist. And as someone who did them for many of her formative years, I totally understand this notion. I also understand that I participated totally willingly, sometimes too willingly, because my idols at the age of 11 were fucking Britney Spears and Shakira, okay? So every angle makes a little bit of sense to me in the grand scheme of things. I think the problematic piece that we run into when we're thinking of the idea of, kids being in pageants is that children, like real children, these babies, don't actually have any agency over what they're doing. They have no autonomy. They have no like real say in the matter, right? So it's probably rare that they're looking to their parents and saying, I want to do that, like yours truly. But bear in mind, I'm mentally ill and I've always been mentally ill. So that's probably why I did that. But it's also really fucking rare, I think, that you have parents like mine who truly had like no skin in the game, no real desire for me to perform XYZ way. They were just like fucking going with the flow, man. Like they did not care if I fell on my ass or if I won the title. Their only sincere hope was that I had fun, maybe made a friend or two, and towards the end, maybe won some scholarship money. And I did all of those things. So I really think in the end, well, I can't tell you, the inner workings of their minds or the intricacies of their opinions. I think that my parents were pretty pleased. And I really don't think that this is always the case. I think that, especially with women, right, we have such this like innate desire that is just built into us via patriarchal bullshit that we want to compete with other women. That's just like, it's this innate thing that like, I can't explain, but it is so fucked up to me and so bonkers to me. And if you didn't grow up with this, I want you to know how lucky you are because like it has ruined so much of my like adult life trying to sort of figure out why I have this like deep rooted desire to just compete against every single woman I see. But, this sort of begs the idea of, those who perhaps have put their children in pageants or adjacent industries, perhaps like performing in really any capacity. If that is really, again, just kind of some way to fulfill some deep-seated desire to be liked or accepted or to fulfill a dream that they once had that can no longer be. Or even through good old-fashioned nepotism, to really follow in their footsteps, sort of like how JonBenét's mom was. She was a state title holder, I think, within the Miss America system. I'm not sure which state. I think it might have been like Oklahoma or Georgia. I don't fucking know. But I'm speculating here. But JonBenét was absolutely following in old mom's shiny, rhinestoney footsteps. I just can't stress enough how lucky and grateful I feel to have had the parents that I did in what was really such a volatile industry, like especially for my age and for my gender. And I feel lucky that they, supported me regardless of the scenario. They, they supported me if I won. They supported me if I, again, if I like fell on my ass, but they never pushed me to keep going if it wasn't something that was not going to like fulfill a part of me. And I feel so grateful for that every day. And I think that if you're going to take a note out of anybody's book, it should be Tim and Nancy's on how the fuck to handle having a child participating in pageantry. So I can't speak to the performing piece of this puzzle as it relates to kids. Again, I can't really fucking speak to any of this. I don't have kids. I'm just like, some shitbird on the internet trying to like hypothesize about how I would treat my child. But I think for some kids, performing comes so naturally, and I would never want to squash that desire within my own kid, especially knowing that performing was my first ever real love. Performing kept me afloat in so many ways as a kid, and honestly, it keeps me afloat in a lot of ways as an adult, i.e., by talking aimlessly into this fucking microphone. I think the real issue at play is the concept of dressing your child up like a doll and throwing them up on stage to compete in what are traditionally just, quote, here's the prettiest kid contests. These are the kind of pageants that you see on Toddlers and Tiaras. It's what JonBenét did, and it's basically my worst fucking nightmare. I've never even attended one of these pageants before, but I honestly I can't imagine attending one. So I think these specific instances of exposure to really traditional pageantry can skew a child's idea of what it means to be beautiful, of what it means to be seen, and of what it means to matter. And those are things you probably really don't want to fuck with if you can help it when their frontal fucking lobes aren't fully formed. I want to dive back into, I want to double down on this piece, on the piece of sort of like female identifying people and the competition piece. And I think for generations now, maybe this is changing. I'm totally speculating here. But for my generation, at least, or at least what I felt when I was growing up and when I started doing pageants, is that there was a really deep desire to participate in pageantry to sort of prove myself to other women my age or other girls my age. And a big piece of this was that I was getting really bullied at my Catholic school at the time. Girls were fucking assholes. And when this opportunity of participating in this pageant arrived, I remember thinking to myself, like, the sort of pomp and circumstance that comes with winning a pageant and being in the newspaper and riding in the parades and doing the performances in your community and, XYZ thing and having the opportunity to go to Junior Miss Iowa or whatever. I remember how like shiny those things sounded when I wasn't well liked. And I think that's a big piece of this puzzle, is that when you participate in pageantry, there is a factor that comes down to wanting to be really liked. And especially in women, right? Like women just want to fucking be liked. Like we are just like craving the acceptance and love of other people. That's like all we want. And pageantry essentially like packages up that concept and presents it really beautifully in a way where when you're 11 or 12 and struggling with bullies at school, it seems like a fucking awesome idea. I also, again, don't want to sound like it seemed like a great idea then and it was, terrible. Like, that's not what I mean. I'm not trying to be like a pageant Scrooge. I'm just trying to say that there's so much nuance to it, right? Like there are so many pros and cons. And sometimes I think the cons outweigh the pros. And sometimes I think the pros outweigh the cons. And it's like never one thing. It is always both. It's always going to be both. And it's never going to be black and white in my eyes. I think there were so many moments in pageantry that were so beautiful and lovely and really transformative. And there were also some that were devastating, and I don't know that I'll ever recover. So it's absolutely both. I think the biggest piece for me as well, alongside the whole like creepiness of like throwing your kid up on stage in like a very, sort of adult outfit when they're like 5. That's just like fucking creepy in my eyes. Anyway, I think the other piece of this that is so troubling is like the women in competition piece, is this concept that like, if we can just compete against other women, then maybe we'll end up liking them, or maybe we'll end up seeing them as less of a threat, or maybe we will feel, we'll feel more intimidating. We'll feel stronger. We'll feel whatever. And it's really fascinating how I have seen this play out in real time in my life of like, it's such a conscious undoing of remembering like, I am not at war with other women. I am not in competition with other women. And that piece of me stopped competing many, many years ago. Like I don't need to compete for the attention in the room. I don't need to compete to be the prettiest person in the room. I don't need to compete to be the funniest. Those are all kind of things that you sort of pick up on rather pretty unintentionally, I would say, when you are doing pageants, but you pick up on them nonetheless. I have never known a woman who did pageants who has never struggled in the end, when it was all said and done, with some piece of the puzzle of like the competitiveness of it all, and how she still feels this sort of like innate desire to be the one that wins in the room. And this is just kind of the nature of it, right? Like, I think I probably picked up on some of that from competitive baton twirling too. Like, I don't ever want to say like, oh, I would never enroll my kid in like a competition, because that's just not realistic. Like, also, I think that there are some really, really lovely like positives of competition and in that sort of competitive nature that you form within yourself, to really like kind of go up against other versions of you. That is one piece of the competition factor of all of this that I still take with me, is that like, how can I be better than the person I was, a year ago or 6 months ago? Or how can I challenge myself a little bit more in this area? And I think that's a great thing. I have never viewed that as like a bad piece of this, but I do think there's such a fine line, right, of finding that balance, of maintaining that balance. And I don't know as to though it's really inherently very easy to maintain that balance in the pageantry world. So I guess when we, round this all up, the answer is probably no. I don't think I would ever subject my kid to a pageant until definitely a specific age. And it would have to be at the request of the kid, right? Like much like my own experience. I think my autonomy in the deciding factor of doing pageants was actually why I kept doing them for so long. It was an area of my life that I basically had full and total control and say over, minus, the whole first runner-up bit. My parents never pushed me to keep going, in the sense that they never forced me into another pageant. So truly all 12, almost 13 years was by my own volition and by their total and utter support. Thanks for joining that fun little just stream of consciousness. That was a really great question. Thank you, Carolyn, for submitting that. I really appreciate it. If you have a question or a topic that you want discussed on the show, send me a DM on Instagram and I will happily talk about it. We're going to get into a really quick section of World War or World Peace, and then we're going to wrap this bitch up. On today's section of World War or World Peace, we got a couple of things. The first is aluminum-free deodorant. So I've been using aluminum-free deodorant for like 7 years because, someone one time was like, aluminum's going to be the smoking gun that kills you. And so I was like, well, fuck, like, I guess I better not use it anymore. Okay, here's my fucking thing. I was at a Halloween party this last weekend. I was visiting my friend Haley in Michigan, and we went to a Halloween party. And I put on this dress, and I had my aluminum-free deodorant on. I use the brand Native. No, I don't have a coupon code. This is literally a free advertisement for them. Or maybe not. Maybe this is going to divert you from buying their products. But I had their deodorant on, and I instantly, I just felt myself start sweating. And I was like, well, motherfuck. So it's not an antiperspirant, right? But then it's like, okay, I'm so sorry. You can't be a deodorant, because if I'm sweating, I'm probably stinking, right? They coexist. So I go over to my friend Haley and I'm like, yo, I need some deodorant that has some shit in it. Give me the chemicals. So, and you know what? I didn't smell. So here's my thing. like use what works for you. But sometimes, as of late, aluminum-free deodorant has me thinking World War, because no, like, and like you just, it's impossible. Like they don't make them strong enough to where you don't fucking stink, you know? So anyway, there's that one. I have a bone to pick with the people that list every single vendor for their wedding when they make their wedding post. So I don't know if I did this or not, and I'm not going to go back and look. And if you go back and look on my Instagram, I'll fucking kill you. But one thing I've noticed lately in the last in the last year since getting married and not having to fucking plan a wedding, is that when people get married, they do this thing where it's like who can have the longest list of vendors. It's literally a competition. So like, okay, here's my thing. If you're putting like the event space, the like things that are applicable to the photo, right? If you're putting the event space, if you're putting your gown, if you're putting like where your husband's tux is from or whatever the fuck, your earrings, or, you know, the things in the photo, the things I can see, fine. But if you start telling me where your fucking garter's from, where your stupid fucking invitations were from, who, like, I get it. Weddings are fucking expensive, man. I just had one. They also make you crazy. Weddings make people fucking psychotic. I'm just coming out of the psychosis that my wedding had over me. So I totally understand the concept of being like, I'm going to show off every single fucking person that, you know, and I want to like thank every single person. I understand that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a thank you post to all of your vendors. You should do that. I'm talking about the very like explicit listing of every single vendor because you want to look like the person who had the most like coordinated wedding ever, and you want to share every single fucking vendor because you think it makes you look like a rich person. Like that's where I draw the fucking line. Like, stop telling me where your fucking like something underneath your dress that I can't even see was from. I don't care. Don't tell me where your insoles are from. Like, this shit drives me nuts. Anyway, that's my rant. I can't wait to do an episode on weddings. That might be my next one. All right, little bitches. Thank you so much for tuning in for this lovely little mini-sode, this stream of consciousness of me, myself, and I. This has been Ann World Peace. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, you can follow us on Patreon. You can follow us on Instagram. It's at Ann World Peace Pod. We have the Patreon linked in the show notes, and you can also sign up for listener support on Spotify if you are listening there. Also, don't forget to share this with anybody that you think may enjoy it. And we will catch you next time with our second guest later this week. Love ya. Bye.